Hello, everyone. This is Keith Stone, and I'm here again with Greg and Janet and Sarah and Elen for HeroesX Office Hours. This is part of V12 of HeroesX, and our discussion questions for today are 3 and 4, for hours 3 and 4. The hour 3 question is, in another world, divorced from the world of the Iliad, could you imagine a man like Achilles falling in love with a woman like Andromache? I like these created worlds, but sorry, no, go ahead. You were about to.
Yeah, no, I was about to mention what a participant is saying. He's mentioning Briseis, and he's mentioning the fact that isn't Briseis set up to be a double of Andromache? Similar stories, they have similar attitudes. So
Nice.
why not?
Why not? I think that's a beautiful way to go because they are so similar, and even their names are very Amazon-like names. Both Andromache, meaning fighter of men, and Briseis, which means something like she who is the personification of martial might, martial power, warrior's power.
Wow, I never made that connection. That's great.
Isn't that nice? Because Chryseis is she who is the personification of wealth, as represented by gold, and in hexameter poetry, Agamemnon is regularly associated with gold by virtue of being the king of Mycenae, rich in gold, and Achilles is, of course, conventionally associated with military might as BA, and the root bri as a kind of parallel semantic function. Isn't that nice? So even in terms of the captors of Chryseis and Briseis, the golden one and the military might person, even in terms of that, these heroes who possess these trophy wives, but they're not wives, they're captured by the spear, but there's a parallelism there. Yeah.
There was little humor on the forums. Achilles says, "I'm not looking for a permanent relationship." Andromache is saying, "I seek a man who wants a lifelong relationship." They're very opposite
Yes,
personalities. Yes. So Achilles, in this case, he won't get married. He won't have a family. That being an ideal bridegroom.
Well, but you know, it's not that. I like the way our participant says he's not ready for a relationship, but that's a sad problem from the standpoint of all the people who admire Achilles. I think of all the traditions of women singing as represented by the songs of Sappho, where technically brides-to-be are yearning to have a bridegroom like Achilles. So the sorrow and the pity is that he didn't grow up to be a man, so to speak. But it's not so much that he resists permanent relationships, he's just not ready for it. And that's considered in the song culture to be something that's very sad and lamentable. Can I put it another way? I can just feel the discomfort that our participants will experience the way I said this. I don't like the way I said it because it sounds as if I'm making excuses for Achilles, but I'm really not. I understand that most of us in our modern culture don't like him, and at the same time, I'm positive that the ancient Greek song culture not only liked him, they loved him, and they the sorrow and the pity is that he didn't get to be as old as Hector got to be. And Hector is a happily married warrior, and Achilles never got the chance. And even the Iliadic appearance of Achilles, the fact that he has long hair and no beard, which isn't necessary for Achilles if you look at all the epics about him, but is certainly necessary for the Achilles of our Iliad. It just makes him, this man of constant sorrow. What a pity that he never matured into a loving husband. He's the bridegroom that every bride wants to have but cannot have, and so that too is lamentable. So
a bit later, though, he expresses some appreciation for longer-term relationships.
Yes.
Shall we say? He says something like,
yes.
Is it just people like Agamemnon who love their wives? What about me?
And what about me? And I love her too, but he's still in training. He's certainly better in he's more sympathique in 9 than he is in 1, where he's still talking about Briseis as property, practically, as property that defines him. And here we go again back to the fact that their names do suggest a kind of proprietary dimension to both Briseis and Chryseis, who doesn't have much of a personality in the Iliad, but Briseis, wow, what a personality.
So there's another angle that they're exploring as well, which is that based on the evidence within the Iliad that we have, and the other potential relationships and love relationships that we know about,
Yeah.
it's that he seems only to love them once he can't have them. So he didn't, as you were just saying, he didn't really think much about Briseis until he didn't have her.
Yeah.
And same with Penthesilea, she's unavailable at that very moment when their eyes lock.
Beautiful.
And they fall in love.
Beautiful.
So Andromache would have to sort of be unavailable, but the only way she's going to be available at all is for Troy to be captured. That's never going to happen. So is that something that comes into play? Does it work kind of both ways, the unavailability of the women as well as the bridegroom?
Yes, I think that kind of bittersweet sorrow makes the eroticism of all these love potentials even more intense. Anthropologists like to tell us that you don't have to have happy endings to have a lot of combustibility in these erotic attractions, and how the eroticism can turn to real love. And I still have to come back to admitting that you don't really see Achilles as an idealized lover in the Iliad, as you would see him in other epics, I'm convinced, if we just had them. And certainly in vase paintings, you can see a lot of potential for Achilles as a more attentive, more idealized lover or potential lover. There's a book by Marco Fantuzzi called, I think it's called Achilles in Love, which reminds me of that film Shakespeare in Love, which I think was based on a play.
Some people are thinking also, again, in the other way round, and again with Achilles as a focus of attention. So could Andromache fall in love with someone like Achilles or even Briseis, because they're he's the enemy.
Yes, and when you think of the fact that Andromache becomes the war prize eventually of the son of Achilles, that's something to think about. And it's certainly something that I was thinking about when I wrote that question. Is that the potential is there? The potential is there.
Where are these women from originally? Are they not geographically kind of similarly located?
Well,
Andromache and Briseis.
oh yes, And if I may advertise the the comments that I have put together in something that's abbreviated SCIO on the website of the Center for Hellenic Studies, and for which, Keith, you are the editor.
Along with Leah Hanhart and Noel Spencer, I should add.
Yeah, we were very generous of you to remind me of that. That's right. But in that commentary, I even have a special color coding for women like Andromache and Briseis. They're linguistically speaking Aeolic, not Ionic. And I think it's pretty clear, at least in Homeric poetry, that they're portrayed as more aristocratic than the Achaean women, that is to say, the women on the other side of the Trojan War. And it's kind of sick that almost accentuates the eroticism of, oh, wow, how exciting it is to capture and dominate a woman who is even more aristocratic than our women.
But by grouping them together like that, I guess the poetry kind of invites this comparison between all of them.
And certainly tragedy, many of the tragedies we have from the 5th century elaborate on what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Well, should we move to the next hour's question?
Yes, but I just love the reaction of the participants.
Okay, here we have more about Achilles. The question is, if you have developed a liking for Achilles as you read more and more of the Iliad, what new thing would you still need to see if you wanted to like him even more? Alternatively, if you have already developed a dislike for him, that's never happened before, would there be any new thing about him that could possibly turn you around so that you would actually start to like him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a difficult question for the participants to come to like Achilles. But there's one comment, and the participant is asking, could we argue that he is like a sheer force of nature, a mega force, a tsunami, rolling upon a shore, a fierce hurricane, causing devastation? But, you know, he still thinks that Achilles, as a sheer force of nature, is a truly great and epic person.
Well, I keep thinking of that Handel opera, Tamerlane, where this countertenor who sings the role of Tamerlane is one of the cruelest people on earth and one of the mightiest people on earth, and kills thousands of people in a single day. But then he falls in love, and how to balance Tamerlane in love with all the hideous things that he does as a force of nature, as a kind of brutish embodiment of a violent windstorm. Well, yeah, Achilles is that kind of brutish personality in some situations, but he's a multiple personality. I'm convinced that he is a very convincing lover, mostly heteroerotic, but in some situations even homoerotic in other song traditions. It's just that our Iliad is so concerned with other aspects of him that you don't really see the kinder, gentler Achilles, except in the personification of his alter ego, Patroclus. I think that is why the lament of Briseis after the death of Patroclus is so moving, because there you see the potential of what Achilles can be as somebody who can be tender. And the Iliad handles this in a very indirect way, but think of it this way: the kinder, gentler, potential lover that Achilles is missing in the Iliad, just as the victim of death at the hands of Apollo is missing in the Iliad. So, in a sense, not only does Achilles not get married, which would be the how shall I say, the consummation of a romantic love affair that leads somewhere, but he doesn't get killed in the Iliad either. So the death of Achilles is experienced by his alter ego, and so is the lovability of Achilles, I suppose. I think our modern friends don't really dislike Patroclus the way many of our contemporary friends have been habituated to dislike Achilles.
Yes, there are many strong feelings
Yes.
about him. But one of the participants said, I haven't seen him enough. I do not have enough information about him yet.
Oh, I love that. And after all, let's look at it this way. There's Achilles, who is definitely the #1 character in the Iliad. And after Rhapsody 1, you don't see him again till Rhapsody 9. That's a big, big, big gap. And so you're right, you didn't get to know him. And before I forget to say this, one rationalization I like to use with wonderful friends who are reading the Iliad with me is to say, listen, if Sappho liked Achilles, then there must be more to him. And Sappho does like Achilles. In the songs of Sappho, I know it's all too fragmentary, but even from the fragments, we can see in the fragmentary testimonies, we can see that that in the song making of Sappho, Achilles is a very, very erotic and aesthetic and desirable male figure.
So some participants are not necessarily liking exactly, but trying to find redeeming features.
Yeah.
And one great way of doing it is comparing him, for example, with Agamemnon. And looking at, well, at least he stood up to Agamemnon, so that's a good start.
Yes. Yeah. Well, then shouldn't we go back to what Keith observed? It is very moving by relative standards. If you think of opportunities for Achilles to express love for a woman, and what he says in Rhapsody 9 could be interpreted as very moving. And I personally see a progression that I think we are meant to perceive that somehow Achilles has evolved by the time we reach 9, and we haven't seen him since 1. But there's a different way that he speaks about Briseis. And then I do think it's absolutely gorgeous the way Briseis laments Patroclus. And I can easily see a similar lament by some other woman character who is maybe even loved by Achilles, and who would sing about Achilles the way Briseis sings about Patroclus. I can see it. It's not there in the Iliad, and so we have to enjoy vicariously the kinder, gentler, more sensitive Achilles. But I return to Keith's point that there is at least one moment of tenderness.
Yeah. Could you also talk a little bit about him in the context of being in a war situation, and maybe the era over which the poem evolved, and that sort of focus on the warrior side of Achilles.
Yeah.
Again, that's not necessarily likable, but it's again a way that people are trying to understand why Achilles was so attractive, not just as a romantic love interest for the women, but also admired by the men.
Oh yes, he is really a paragon of warrior ethic and of leadership. Even though we don't really see him in that role very, very much, but just the way he speaks, I'd like to focus on how every time Achilles is quoted by the master narrator, he is so poetically head and shoulders above any other speaker. That's something that was beautifully observed by Richard P. Martin in the book Language of Heroes, where he says that just as, could I put it this way, Homer is a virtuoso compared to other epic poets, so also Achilles, the star of Homer, is a virtuoso in speaking by comparison with other characters who are speaking. And after all, it's not speaking, it's singing, since everything that is quoted in Homeric poetry is understood as singing because it's in dactylic hexameter. So if people speak in dactylic hexameter, they are poets themselves, right? And so, can I put it another way, that Achilles has this super poetic identity, which makes him super romantic just by virtue of how he speaks. But without pressing this analogy too much, even though I think that the idea of Shakespeare in love is in many ways naive, I like the idea of sometimes thinking of the author as a character. If you think of the master narrator as a character, then you also think of creations of the master narrator as somehow parallel. And that is another way of thinking of Achilles as a very, very accomplished and sensitive character, because after all, he is the creation of an ultra-sensitive master narrator.
I like it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all very much. I do have to run, so I will check out, but I'm so looking forward to the next conversation.
Same here.
Yep.
Till next time.
See you.
Bye.